This summer, we saw tons of moves made around the NBA world. From the NBA draft, to NBA free agency, to trades made between teams, a lot of players were on the move, and pretty much every team welcomed some new faces into their locker rooms. When these moves are made, everybody in the NBA world is always quick to give their 2 cents on the matter, where deciding whether the moves were good or bad before they even have a chance to make an impact on their new teams. And this brings us to the topic of today's video. Today, we'll be looking at the 10 free agency signings that Bleacher Report labeled as the worst moves of the offseason all the way back in August. And now that we're a month into the season, we'll be revisiting this list and analyzing whether they were spot on about their assessment or if they were way off. Before we start though, it turns out about 49% of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so please, if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. So in the article, they went in reverse order from 10 to 1 for the worst signings, and the 10th worst one on the list from this offseason according to them was Chris Paul, who got a 4-year, $120 million extension with the Phoenix Suns. The reasoning behind this was obviously because of the amount of money that they paid him, plus the length of the deal, as he is a 36-year-old player right now and will be 40 by the time the deal expires. In that regard, I guess there can be some legitimate gripes with the deal, but after making it all the way to the NBA Finals last season, with him playing an integral part in their run, they had to do what they had to do to bring him back. His leadership off the floor, his poise in big moments, and his playmaking ability to create for everyone around him are still a vital part of the Suns, who currently have the 2nd best record in the Western Conference again. So while you could nitpick at the size of the contract, it was always a bit ridiculous to label it as one of the worst signings of the offseason based on how impactful he is to this franchise. Next up, the 9th worst signing of the offseason, according to Bleacher Report, was Kyle Lowry of the Miami Heat on a 3-year deal worth $85 million. A lot of the reasoning behind this one matched up to the reasoning that they gave for the Chris Paul one, as Lowry, too, is getting up there in age and is starting to slow down a bit individually. He's only averaging about 13 points so far this season, and he isn't really shooting it great, but the Heat brought Lowry in to be a playmaking ball handler to ease the workload of Jimmy Butler in that regard, and his shooting should trend upward as the year progresses. The team ranks in the top 10 defensively and top 5 offensively right now, which is definitely an improvement over a season ago, and even if Lowry's individual production may not look the part, he's definitely making the Heat a better team than they were last season. So again, I understand the logistics of calling it a bad signing, but he provides much more than just the box score numbers for the team, so again, I can't agree with them labeling it one of the worst signings of the summer. Next up, the 8th worst signing according to Bleacher Report was Daniel Theus to the Rockets on a 4-year, $36 million deal. This one was tough to rationalize at the time, and now that we're a month into the season, it still definitely holds up as a worthy candidate for this list. The Rockets are one of the worst teams in the NBA by design, because they're rebuilding and they should be focused on the development of their young core. Daniel Theus, however, is a 29-year-old defensive specialist at the center position who pretty much is what he is already, and would be better served in the rotation of a playoff team. Committing 4 years to a player like that didn't make much sense, and it still doesn't make any sense now, so this one too holds up as one of the worst of the month into the season. Next, the 7th worst signing in the article was Zack Collins to the Spurs for 3 years and $22 million. Collins has flashed promise as a versatile big man in his first 3 seasons with the Trailblazers, but the fact of the matter is that he has been far too inconsistent and injury-prone to justify this kind of payday. His production is mediocre at best even when healthy, the idea of him is good, but surprise surprise, he hasn't even been able to play a game with the Spurs yet this year because he's still injured. This, too, does hold up as one of the worst of the summer because the team is banking on him not only improving, but staying healthy. The sixth worst on the list now was Duncan Robinson re-signing with the Heat for 5 years and about $90 million. Duncan Robinson emerged as a sharpshooter over the last 2 seasons for the Heat, making 45% of his threes 2 seasons ago and 41% of his threes last season on a high volume of attempts, and shooting is always a hot commodity in the NBA. The issue, though, is that $18 million per year is a lot when Robinson struggles in most other facets of the game, specifically on defense. And now that he's in a bit of a slump to start the season, after signing that big contract, shooting just 33% from 3 so far, it doesn't exactly help his case either. It's not that I don't think the Heat bringing him back was good, but I do still think this was a big overpay for them, so in my opinion, he does still belong on this list. Next up, the 5th worst signing according to this list was Kelly Olynyk to the Detroit Pistons for 3 years and $37 million. The Olynyk signing is in the same ballpark as the Daniel Theis signing, where they landed on this list because of how weird the fit was, more so than the fact they got paid too much. Olynyk is a solid stretch big who, at 30 years old, is who he is at this point. The team should be chasing players with upside instead of finished products like this, and while he's been decent this year for them, he probably does still belong here a month later. Next, the 4th worst signing on this list was Devonte Graham to the Pelicans for 4 years and $47 million. Graham's always been a streaky volume shooter who operates well in pick-and-roll situations and can catch fire from deep every now and then, so this kind of contract really isn't all that egregious for him at all. A lot of people took the fact that the Pelicans let Lonzo Ball walk in free agency out on Graham here, which isn't fair to him, so while the team definitely did make some mistakes this offseason, it doesn't necessarily mean that this individual signing was all that bad, and a month into the year, Graham is still the player that he was with the Charlotte Hornets prior, so I still see him being on this list as an overreaction instead of being justified. Up next, the 3rd worst signing of the offseason according to this list was Evan Fournier to the New York Knicks for 4 years and $78 million. The Knicks were very aggressive this offseason, and in many ways, their moves have helped them, as they now have a top 5 offense in the league through a month of play. But simultaneously, the impenetrable defense they built last year has seemingly crumbled all the way down to being ranked 25th in the league, and the team is now barely above 500 record-wise. Fournier isn't producing like a guy making $20 million, and this move can definitely still be questioned. So honestly, I know Knicks fans aren't going to want to hear this, but this was probably one of the worst signings that was made this summer. Next up is the runner-up to the worst signing of the summer according to this list, and it was Jarrett Allen re-signing with the Cavaliers for 5 years and $100 million. In the offseason, so many people were concerned about the Cavaliers' crowded front court, but now a month into this season, Allen and the team as a whole could not possibly be making those doubters eat their words anymore. The Cavaliers are the 6th best defense in the league because of how well that Jarrett Allen and rookie Evan Mobley are gelling together holding down the middle. Allen is protecting the rim at an elite level, he's playing his role as a pick-and-roll big, finishing strong around the basket, making a whopping 69% of his shots from the field, and he's posting averages of 14 points and 11 rebounds per game. The Cavs have the 4th best record in the East so far, and look like one of the most improved teams of the season, and that wouldn't be the case without them re-signing Jarrett Allen, so this for sure is a ridiculous sentiment to label him as a bad signing. And finally, we've arrived at the player who was labeled as the worst signing of the offseason, which was DeMar DeRozan to the Bulls for 3 years and $85 million. I have to say, I was a bit concerned about this move myself at the time, and I'm big enough to admit that I was dead wrong. The Bulls are half a game out of first place in the Eastern Conference right now, and DeRozan has been shooting the lights out to start the year. I feel like the narrative surrounding DeRozan is so over-exaggerated at this point, where people think he's some sort of detriment who only goes out with the intention to score and plays selfishly, when in reality, his lethal mid-range game, post-game, and tough shot-making ability can be absolutely vital to a winning team in the right circumstance like this. He's taken so much pressure off of Zach LaVine, which has resulted in LaVine's turnovers decreasing. He's closed out plenty of games in crunch time for the Bulls, and defensively, he has not been nearly as much of a detriment as people thought he would be, with the Bulls still ranking in the top 5 on the defensive end of the floor. Ranking him as the worst signing of the offseason is absolutely absurd in hindsight, so of course, there's no way that this label still holds up now. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about these signings in hindsight. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.